Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this one-day multidisciplinary international e-conference on the theme of multidisciplinary perspective on health, society, environment and sustainable development organized by Department of Geography and Internal Quality Assurance Cell of Jnana Prabodhini Mandals, Sri Mallikarjun and Sri Chetan Manju Desai College, Dede, Kankon. I feel great pleasure to welcome you all for this e-conference as it gives opportunity to interact with intelligent, versatile minds working in various fields and capacities across the globe. I would like to congratulate all those who made it possible to bring the community of researchers together to dwell on the burning issues of health, environment, sustainable development involving drastic changes in the societal framework. I hope that a deeper understanding on the prevailing issues which will be discussed today will bring required enthusiasm among the participants to explore varied dimensions of the betterment of society. Even though our college is located in the remote area of the state of Goa, we aspire to be global in perspective and intend to drip it among the students community, mostly coming from deprived section of the society. Despite having limitation of resources, we are inculcating values among the fraternity to think globally, to empower them to act locally. I am sure that this platform will certainly provide scope to work together for the betterment of the society, which is indeed required to address the issues of degrading environment, climate change, food security, pandemic situations like COVID-19 and others. Let us bring our intellectual resources together to make this world a better place to live. Our temple of learning will certainly work in coordination with you all to achieve the goals of sustainability. I once again congratulate our Department of Geography and ICAC for making it possible to bring learned together to discuss and address the issues of present world for better future. I take this opportunity to extend my warm greetings to all the participants. Kindly make this day successful by providing your insight in the field of your expertise. Thank you one and all.
Hello everybody, my name is Meryl De Silva, Assistant Professor from Government College of Arts, Science and Commerce, Khandwala, Marcel, Goa, and I will be presenting the paper titled An Overview of the Alternative Tourism Potential of Kankon, Goa, India. As we all know, the state of Goa has a unique environment and it has created a place for itself on the international tourism map because of the beautiful environment that we have been blessed with, the natural biodiversity. Tourism has picked up since the 1960s because the government of Goa gave special emphasis to this economic industry. However, tourism is concentrated in the northern part of Goa much more, and that too in the coastal belt only. So in this paper we are going to be looking at the Taluka of Kankon, which is the southernmost taluka, and we will be trying to discuss based on two objectives. The first one is to identify the existing major tourism places of Kankon, and the second is to identify the potential of Kankon as an alternative tourist destination. So currently we have got multiple temples which are in honor of the local deity Sri Mallikarjun, as well as various other deities. We have got multiple beaches. Since it's a rocky coastline interspersed with sandy beaches, it's very beautiful. For example, we have got Palole, Galji Bagh, Butterfly Beach, Tarpon Beach, Agonda Beach, etc. And we have also got lots of rivers which crisscross the coastline. We have got the Kabdaram Fort, we have got Kotigaon Wildlife Sanctuary with multiple endangered species. We have also got a lot of waterfalls, Kuske, Bamanbuda, Bhupar, etc. Now currently, according to the National Center for Sustainable Coastal Management, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, it's not advisable to add more pressure on the existing coastal resources of Kankan because the carrying capacity is being exceeded in most of the beaches. And multiple online and print media sources have reported over the years that locals are dead against any new development projects because the benefits of these projects don't reach the locals. It's mostly few private parties which benefit from it. So Kankan is the home to various tribes of Goa such as Velips, Kumbis, and they are the most vulnerable and least beneficial from multiple tourism projects. So promotion of their customs, culture, lifestyle, cuisine will help benefit these tribes immensely and help in their financial emancipation while relieving the stress from the coastal areas. And according to online websites, there seems to be no shortage of visitors to Goa in spite of the 2020 pandemic. In fact, various ministers and print and online media sources have said that Indian domestic tourists, since they could not leave the country to vacation elsewhere, they are coming to Goa in large droves. And pandemic has also made people rethink the mainstream tourism model. They want individualized experiences, and for that promoting the customs culture is very important. So time could not be better for the state of Goa to turn to alternative tourism opportunities. And Kankan Taluka has not yet been saturated by mass tourism like the North Goa, so it has a chance to take new direction in the form of ecotourism, cultural tourism, heritage tourism, culinary tourism, all under the umbrella of alternative tourism. If you try to search tourism in Kankan, what's going to show up first, especially on TripAdvisor, is going to be the suggested beaches, and then down the list there are going to be multiple beaches only, along with few other naturopathy private establishments. So tourism in Kankan currently is skewed towards the coast, and within the coast as well it is highly concentrated in a few pockets only. So there is high potential to develop homestays in the interior of the taluka, and currently whatever is being advertised as homestays mostly is commercial motels or inns. So visitors, they want more individual and authentic experiences, and since now we depend on technology to plan our holidays, it should not be an issue to reach out to the tourists entering the state, since by technology even individual stakeholders can promote themselves. And marketing the local landscape, lifestyle, cuisine will also serve as an incentive for the youth and future generations to not migrate out of their villages in search of employment. This will help reverse the negative impact that Goa has gained in the past decades and ensure that the economic benefits of tourism are gained by locals, as well as curb the rising in-migration of unskilled labor in the taluka to cater to the jobs in the tourism industry. Okay, so government policies and advertisement campaigns has to focus on these new aspects and stop focusing only on beach tourism nowadays. So to conclude, it is evident from the above discussion that development of alternative tourism in Kankan is vital, as the younger generations have lost touch with traditional occupations. Ecotourism and cultural tourism will not only relieve stress on the coastal areas but will also ensure that the hinterlands develop. This will ensure that local customs and traditions are preserved and promoted. Finally, the economic benefits to the locals will be immense, as such types of tourism cannot be duplicated. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, I am Mr. Sabu Agnalalita, College Director of Physical Education at Sri Mallikarjun and Sri Chetan Manju Desai College, Kankan, Goa. My topic for presentation is Body Mass Index changes due to COVID-19 lockdown related inactivity and its implication on health. The body mass index is a simple method to check the actual tissue mass, in other words, whether a person is thin or fat. An individual's body weight and body height is measured and the BMI is calculated. Recently, due to COVID-19 lockdown, there has been a reduced amount of physical activity, an increased level of stress and change in food pattern. This tremendously impacts the body mass index over a period of time. Rationale of study is that the body mass index is a very commonly used index wherein the height and weight are universally applied. The simple formula is used and a person, whether the person is thin, normal or obese, is identified. It also is an early indicator to advise health complication. Also, it provides an insight about lifestyle changes due to inactivity, stress, food shortage, etc. Objective of the study is to measure the weight changes and its subsequent effect on the BMI profile. Also to highlight the outcome on the health due to these changes, to bring to light the importance of fitness, and to monitor the BMI and weight control. The hypothesis is that it is a null hypothesis which says that there is no significant difference between the pre-COVID mean weight and the post-COVID mean weight. And the alternate hypothesis is that there is a significant difference, that is, when the p is less than 0.05. The methodology is that 40 staff members of Sri Mallikarjun and Sri Chetan Manju Desai College, Kankon were selected at random. The study measured the height and weight of both pre and post COVID-19 lockdown, that is from March to November 2020. It was between the age group of 20 to 55. The formula is a very simple one. The weight is measured in kilograms divided by the height square. I have also calculated a simple formula here. In this case, I enter my weight and I enter my height. I enter my height in meters. I enter it as 1.70, and my weight before corona was 62 and after COVID is now 64. So I enter 64 and the reading is that my BMI is 22.14 and the status is that I am healthy. The observations and findings of my study is that between the pre-COVID and post-COVID, there has been an average increase of 2.34 kilograms of weight, that is a 4% increase among my subjects. In the BMI, there is an increase of 0.9, that is also another 4% increase. The significant value is that it is 0.00 and to the power of negative 16. That means, and here in this graph you see that there are two line graphs, one is of BMI and one is of weight. The one in red is the one that is after lockdown, and there has been a significant change seen in both the graphs. And when it comes to the range, it has been seen that most of the staff members have been normal, but in the post-COVID there is a change in the pattern, as can be seen in this graph. The conclusion and the recommendation. If it is not properly checked, then this weight control and its increase of weight could lead to very serious complications, like some of them are mentioned here, like heart attack, blood pressure problems, lifestyle diseases like diabetes, osteoporosis, cancer, etc. And also, if you check this, then the nation also needs, and it is the need of the hour, that is, in case we don't have this control over our weight and our BMI, then it could be a problem in the productivity also of the nation. Thank you so much.
Good morning everyone. I am Sapna Rokode and today I am going to present e-conference paper. First of all, I would like to thanks to UGC General who has given to good opportunity to present here and share our ideas. My research topic is to study the development trajectory of two historical marginalized community, the Thakar and Katkari. The objective of this study to find out the differences of the development trajectory among the both tribal community, the Thakar and Katkari. The methodology which has the use for this study, the primary and secondary data. Primary data which has collected from the two hamlets, to hamlets of the village and the Karjat Taluka, and the secondary data has been used to supplement the primary data. The findings of this study: the study tried to understand the nature of development differences of two communities who were the equal socio-economic status a country ago. And the conclusion which are coming out, the main reason for the differences emerging from the study is the land ownership and the access of the common property resources such as the forest, and nowadays these both are community, they have lost the land ownership and the relation with the forest. The government, even the government program and the scheme do not appear have played the effective role, and the failure of the government intervention seem to have led a lack of livelihood opportunity or option for the both community. The paper aimed to put front of the strategy and means by the which the long pandemic issue can be resolved. Thank you.
Namaskar. My name is Sufal Bepari. Currently, I am pursuing my master's degree on political science from Rabindra Bharati University, Kolkata, West Bengal. I am extremely grateful to all concerned for giving me the opportunity to present my paper at this virtual international conference. The title of my paper is South Asian Politics During COVID-19, an observation with special reference to India. The COVID-19 pandemic has become the focal theme of current world politics. As a result of the pandemic, people's lives, livelihoods, as well as the national and international economy and politics have faced various challenges. South Asia, the world's most populous geographical region, has also been hit hard by the COVID-19. India has strategically initiated medical diplomacy or COVID diplomacy to deepen multilateral relations as well as nourish its demand for regional and global leadership. India sent a large number of essential medicines like hydroxychloroquine, HQC, paracetamol and medical equipments such as PPE kits, surgical masks, gloves and hand sanitizers and digital thermometers to its immediate neighbors. As a leading country in South Asia, India has extended a helping hand not only to its neighbors but to the different countries around the world. In this difficult time, India has adopted the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam or the world is one family approach. India has a large pharmaceutical industry, which is why India is called the world pharmacy. In this regard, India holds a favorable position for vaccine diplomacy. The WHO has already warned the world about the possible negative effects of vaccine nationalism. India has the potential to overtake vaccine nationalism because India is a major drug supplier in the global south. India has enhanced cooperation with its extended neighbors. Professor Hasbi Pant has rightly observed this extensive global outrage has been a departure from the past when India tended to look at itself as a nation with limited ability to shape global outcomes. The new outward orientation is in tune with New Delhi's larger foreign policy approach aimed at projecting India as a responsible and reliable global stakeholder. India has initiated new diplomacy in the SAARC through COVID-19. COVID-19 has also helped to revive the SAARC on March 15, 2020. The SAARC countries held their first virtual meeting. In addition to taking various decisions, it was proposed to set up a SAARC emergency response fund for COVID-19. Unfortunately, in many instances, India has received unfavorable responses from its neighbors despite her continuous cooperative efforts. The current Prime Minister of Nepal, KP Oli, has indirectly blamed India for the spread of coronavirus in Nepal by saying that the Indian virus is more lethal than the Chinese or Italian virus. On the other hand, India's arch rival Pakistan has used the COVID-19 situation to promote cross-border terrorism against India. The position of South Asia in the US-China rivalry among COVID-19 also becomes significant. The anti-China sentiment in the global community has intensified for concealing the facts about the coronavirus outbreak by the Chinese government. Countries around the world, especially the Western democratic nations, have taken an anti-China stance. China has launched face mask diplomacy. Beijing has provided medical assistance to many countries throughout the world. The United States, on the other hand, has announced a financial package of $274 million for the 64 most coronavirus-affected countries. Among the South Asian countries, India, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka are on this high priority list. Comparatively, China is far ahead of the US in terms of its role as a responder to the global pandemic. To bring the world's largest advanced economies under the one umbrella, Donald Trump has proposed that the G7 should be reformed to include India, Australia, South Korea, and Russia to make it G10 or G11. On May 12, 2020, Narendra Modi, in his address to the nation, announced Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan or Self-Reliant India Mission. India's self-reliant move could be effective in eliminating its over-dependency on China as well as emerging as a vital link in the post-COVID-19 global supply chain. According to Professor C. Raja Mohan, for India, threat threat today comes not from the US-dominated unipolar world, but the unfolding of a unipolar Asia. If India aligns with the US-led Western world, it will not only enrich India's economy but also underpin its position in world politics. Proponent of non-alignment fear that India would become a pawn between the two great powers, but this proved to be wrong. Rather, India will play a significant role in shaping the new world order. Thank you.
Good morning everybody. I am Dr. Sandeep Patrikar, Assistant Professor, Department of Geography, Dagdojrao Deshmukh Arts, Science, Commerce College, Waluj, Aurangabad. I am very thankful to organizers for giving us opportunity to present our research paper in this international e-conference. Topic of my research paper is Impact of Corona Pandemic on Aurangabad tourism industry. Abstract: the tourism industry is responsible for 6.1% of India gross domestic product. The tourism industry directly and indirectly employs more than 26 million citizens, which represent 5.7% of the world economic forum. Aurangabad is considered the tourism capital of Maharashtra. Following research paper is a quick review. The Aurangabad's tourism industry impact of COVID pandemic on Aurangabad's tourism industry. Objectives: first, to know that importance of tourism for Aurangabad district. Second, to study the impact of COVID pandemic on Aurangabad tourism industries. Study area: given research papers is the study of the most dotted region of Aurangabad district. The geographical location of Aurangabad is 19 degree 18 minutes and 20 degree 41 north latitude and 74 degree 34 to 76 degree 4 east longitude. The geographical area of Aurangabad is 10,107 square kilometer. Population of urban area is 16,601 and rural area is 20,79,327 2011. Total literacy is 80.40%. In the male literacy is 89.31% and female literacy 78.81%. Conclusion: the world is suffering from COVID-19. There are 9.64 million cases are in India, 1.85 million cases in Maharashtra and 45,673 cases in Aurangabad till 5 December 2020. The number of high and Maharashtra, capital of tourism, is in red zone, hence all the tourist places are still closed. The present crisis entrepreneur remain hopeful that monuments will reopen and the business will pick up in the near future. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I am Ms. Anusha Sawant Desai from Shri Mallikarjun and Shri Chetan Manju Desai College, Kankana, Goa. This paper is being jointly done by me and my colleague Dr. Sucheta Naik. The title of our paper is Agro-Tourism for Sustainable Agricultural Development in Kankana Taluka. Kankana, a southernmost taluka in Goa, faces a rapid decline in agricultural productivity. Non-availability of agricultural laborers, heavy labor charges, problems from wild animals, uncertain rain, lack of irrigation facilities, and migration of workers due to better prospects in cities are some of the reasons. The objectives of our study include to examine the importance of agro-tourism development in Kankana Taluka, to specify a suitable framework for the operation of agro-tourism centers in Kankana Taluka, to identify the problems of agro-tourism and to make suitable suggestions for establishment of agro-tourism centers. The study tries to find out the problems attached to agrotourism in Kankona by focusing on probable agrotourism centers and facilities needed. The study is based on secondary data, the data collected from related articles, research papers, Indian Council of Agricultural Research reports, Economic Survey of Goa, websites of the Government of Goa and Ministry of Agriculture and Tourism Department. Key factors for agrotourism centers include abundance of water in places such as Chapolin Dam, Huskeng, Gaundongri, Bupra, Bamanduro, Kotigaon, Huskeng Waterfall, Lole, Khola, Shiva Waterfall, Pungini, Bowal Waterfall. Places of ancient importance include historical places like Kabderam Fort, Mallikarjun Temple, Parshuram Temple, Patgadh Mutt, ancient Pike and Wat Margi at Punganim and Lolium village can be given added value for choosing such agro-heritage tourism centers. In Kankona Taluka, there are altogether more than 40 temples and 8 churches. Choosing the agro-tourism centers nearby such holy places will also be a viable option. Places like Kotigaon, Gaundongri, Sristhal, Khola are far away from the city life, having natural landscape, cultivated land, valleys, falls, real life village have the potential to attract tourists. Accessibility by bus or train. Places such as Paulay, Buane, Lolia, Sholi, Char Rasta, Galjibagh, Doyani, Bhatpar, Punguni, Dhapat are easily accessible by both road and rail. Locally developed places like Buane, Karmalghat is also very famous for its seasonal cultivation of indigenous greens like tender bamboo shrubs, wild leguminous shrub, etc. Some tourists are also interested in ecotourism along with agrotourism. Therefore, ecotourism centers of Kankona like Khola Kapalan Beach, Tarpan for fishing, Butterfly Beach, Devbagh, Porem can also be included. Benefits of agrotourism. Agrotourism will reduce migration of rural people from rural areas to urban areas, reduce the negative impact created due to extensive beach tourism, additional source of income for rural poor, preservation of nature, reduces burden on beach tourism, overall development of infrastructure facilities. To conclude, for sustaining agriculture in Kankon and to stop migration from rural to urban areas and to increase the income by ensuring employment to all the rural household, agrotourism can be the best solution. Local and state governments should also take initiative and provide financial support for a brighter and stronger future of Kankona Taluka. Thank you very much.
My paper title is A Geographical Study of Literacy in Parbhani District of Maharashtra. My name is Dr. Bhagwan Prabhakar Rao Shendge, Assistant Professor, Department of Geography, B. Raghunath Arts, Commerce and Science College, Parbhani, Maharashtra. My paper abstract: literacy is an important component for the study of demographic, socio-culture and economic status of any region. Literacy is an index of human development, quality of human life and basic human right. The study is based on secondary data. In this study, attempt has been made to analyze the strange phenomena of literacy rate in total population of Parbhani district. The objective of paper to examine the literacy in Parbhani district of Maharashtra state. The demographic parameter has been taken into account for the study of human resource development. It is notified that literacy rate in Parbhani district was 73.34%. It is observed that the female rate was 63.63% and male was 82.64%. It is notified here in each Tahsil of Parban district, the male literacy rate was higher than female. The study has observed that in Parban district, the effective literacy was recorded only 36.42% in 1981, 46.61% in 1991, 67.04% in 2001, and it reached up to 73.34% in 2011. My paper keywords: population, literacy, male female literacy. Education is universally acknowledged as one of the key inputs contributing to the process of national and individual development. Literacy is an index of human development and quality of human life. Any person above the age of 7 years who can read and write in any language is treated as literacy. The quality of population can be judged from the level of literacy. My paper study area is Parban district, located in central part of Marathwada region, is selected for present study. It lies in Godavari river basin. The study region is bounded to north by Buldana and Hingoli district, west by Jalna, south by Bid and Latur, and east by Nanded. It covers an area
मैं जयंतीलाल राठौर, MBM साइंस एंड होम साइंस कॉलेज राजपुर से। मेरा आज का रिसर्च पेपर का टाइटल है स्वास्थ्य पर कोविड-19 का प्रभाव। अध्ययन के उद्देश्य: स्वास्थ्य पर कोविड-19 के प्रभाव का अध्ययन करने के लिए शोध विधि प्रस्तुत अध्ययन के विवरणात्मक अनुसंधान विधि का प्रयोग किया गया था। द्वितीय, तथ्यों के संकलन में पुस्तकों, पत्रिकाओं, रिसर्च जर्नल और रिपोर्ट आदि का सहारा लिया गया था। कोविड-19 के दीर्घकालीन प्रभाव: कोविड-19 के लक्षण कभी कभी महीनों तक बने रह सकते हैं। वायरस फेफड़ों, हृदय और मस्तिष्क को नुकसान पहुंचा सकता है, जिससे दीर्घकालीन स्वास्थ्य समस्याओं का खतरा बढ़ जाता है। ज्यादातर लोग जिन्हें कोरोना वायरस से जानते हैं कुछ ही हफ्तों में ठीक हो जाते हैं, लेकिन कुछ लोग यहाँ तक कि जिनके पास बीमारी है हल्के संस्करण थे, उनके प्रारंभिक वसूली के बाद लक्षणों का अनुभव करना जारी रखते हैं। कुछ लोगों और कई गंभीर चिकित्सक स्थितियों वाले लोगों कोविड-19 लक्षणों का चुस्त अनुभव करने की सबसे अधिक संभावना है, लेकिन युवा भी अन्यथा स्वस्थ लोग संक्रमण के बाद हफ्तों में महीनों तक अस्वस्थ महसूस कर सकते हैं। समय के साथ सबसे आम लक्षण जो शामिल है वो निम्न है: पहला, थकान; दूसरा, सांस लेने में कठिनाई; तीसरा, खांसी; चौथा, जोड़ों का दर्द; पांचवा, छाती में दर्द। अन्य दीर्घकालीन संकेतों में लक्षणों में निम्न शामिल हो सकता है: पहला, मांसपेशियों में दर्द या सिर दर्द हो सकता है; दूसरा, तेज दिल की धड़कन हो सकती है; तीसरा, गंध या स्वाद में कमी आ सकती है; चौथा, याददाश्त, एकाग्रता या नींद की समस्या भी हो सकती है; पांचवा, चकते या बालों का झड़ना भी हो सकता है। कोविड-19 के कारण उनकी क्षति भी हो सकती है। इनमें कोविड-19 के एक बीमारी के रूप में देखा जाता है। मुख्य रूप से फेफड़ों को प्रभावित करता है। यह कई अन्य अंगों को भी नुकसान पहुंचा सकता है। यह अंग क्षति दीर्घकालीन स्वास्थ्य के जोखिम को बढ़ा सकती है। कोविड-19 से प्रभावित होने वाले अंगों में शामिल है फेफड़े, दिल, दिमाग। और दूसरी बात यह है मनोदशा और थकान के साथ समस्या भी हो सकती है। इसके अलावा दीर्घकालिक कोविड-19 के प्रभाव अभी भी अज्ञात है। शोधकर्ता सलाह देते कि कोविड के कारण डॉक्टर उन लोगों पर भी कड़ी निगरानी रखते हैं जिनके पास कोविड-19 है, यह देखने के लिए उनके अंग ठीक हो बाद में काम कर रहे हैं। निष्कर्ष: विश्व स्वास्थ्य संस्था कोविड-19 को रोकने के लिए जारी किए गए निर्देशों का सरकार के द्वारा सोशल मीडिया, पोस्टर और पत्रिकाओं के माध्यम से प्रसारित किया जाना चाहिए। जो व्यक्ति तनाव से गुजरे और बाद के चरणों में मनोदशा के गंभीर लक्षण हो को विकसित करने का खतरा है, उनके लिए संबोधित किया जाना चाहिए। वायरस के प्रकोप के संपर्क में आने वाली समस्या आबादी के अलावा स्वास्थ्य देखभाल कर्मचारियों को भी गंभीर ध्यान और मनोवैज्ञानिक परामर्श की आवश्यकता है।
I'm Dr. Kavita Mate, and behalf of Dr. M.V. Kulhe from Barrister Sheshra Wankhede Mahavidyalaya, Kameshwar, Nagpur, presenting a paper entitled The Growing Problems of Gutka and Kharra Consumption Among the Working Women, a Sociological Study. An addiction is commonly denoted by the habit that is rejected or cause a wrath of society. Drinks, wine, cigarette, BD, tobacco, intoxicating drugs as well as Gutka and Kharra are measured under an addiction. 90% of cancer comes from the Kharra Gutka chewing. The maximum proportion of the Kharra Gutka chewing observed among the rural areas as well as the slum in the urban are specially. Gutka is prepared from the mixture of betel nut, tobacco and lime by adding the scented liquid as well. This mixture is supposed to be very harmful to the health. Due to its unique taste, one who first tastes it get attracting gradually to its chewing. Gutka is sold in a label pouch while white Kharra is sold openly in the plastic wrapper at the pan thela. There are some famous Gutka pouch manufacturing companies including Bimal, Manikchand, Chirag, Ketan, etc. Objectives: to know and check the proportion of Gutka Kharra chewing in working women, to study the various effects on health, mental, family, economic and social development. Findings: there are 90% women, laborer women observed under the BPL, and out of these 70% women had been as low educated women. Under the age group between the 20 to 60 observed the victim of the Gutka Kharra addiction. There were about 60% laborer women diagnosed of the symptoms of the various fetal diseases like anemia, womb cancer, weak digestion and other gynecological problems. Except these, the fetal diseases, they were trapped by uncleanliness, low life standard, poverty, negligence towards the children, mental instability, irritation, etc. Though the manufacturing and the selling of Gutka Kharra products are banned in Maharashtra state, the illegal manufacturing and supply from the other state had been done here. An addiction is a universal problem ever. The more and more Gutka Kharra are the most destructive addiction, which is known as slow poison itself. As Gutka Kharra chewing has getting popularity in the Nagpur city, and as a result the proportion of the oral cancer has been increasing horribly day by day in the city. The relevant study showed that the Gutka Kharra addiction among the laborer women had badly affected their health, mental, family, economic and social development. Thank you.
I am Dr. B.K. Harvi, Associate Professor in Geography, Sant Sevrapanath MBA, Government College of Arts and Commerce, Virnoda, Pune. My research paper title is Evolution of Pungicity, a Geographical Study. Introduction. The concept of urban was developed by Ernest Sumner Draper, a town planner and landscape designer of United States of America in 1937. Generally, the city planners use this term to express the extravagant and unauthorized type of city augmentation which is denounced for reduction in farming terrain, degradation of environment by pollution of air, water and soil as a result of hysterical expansion that is common occurring feature in peripheral zone of urban areas of industrialized countries. Study area: Panji was once a place of full of segment pools, peasants dwelling in huts. During the region of Mohammedans, the only remarkable structure was the castle of Yusuf Adil and inhabited by fishermen, and Shah built in 1470. The Portuguese conquered the old city of Goa in 1510. The area was then only fortified city. In 1512, the Portuguese seized the Tiswadi Taluka along with islands of Charavo, Diwar and Joa. This is the map of the study area. Sources of data: to know the growth reality at grassroots level, few sample wards have been selected and it is based on different environmental conditions, population size and socio-economic conditions. The field observation has been made in selected wards and same material has been incorporated in the part of analysis throughout the study. Aims and objectives: to understand the physical and cultural condition of the study unit, to study the morphology of Panji city, to study and understand the trends of evolution of urban growth of Panji city. Methodology: the literature regarding the origin
Good afternoon. This is Mr. Ravindra Mede from Department of Geography, Savitribai Phule, Pune University, Pune. I am going to present my topic on the intergenerational transition of educational attainment of scheduled caste in Ahmedabad district. This is a brief part of my PhD thesis which I am going to present here. Firstly, I would like to introduce my topic. Through introduction, I would like to enhance the concept what actually I did in this section. It is totally related to the education and how education is playing an important role or vital role in our society or in our life. Education is one of the crucial requirements of life. It is said by different researchers or scientists. A low degree of literacy is an obstacle to economic growth. The investment in education is a measure of the future development of any country. In the same way, I would continue the part. In case of scheduled caste, traditionally it is a vulnerable social group and lag behind in educational attainment. However, due to social movements, government positive policies and support, the group is grooming. With considering all these parameters, it is required to work on this topic to analyze the intergenerational educational attainment of scheduled caste. For the present study, I used the which data and methodology I have adopted for this present study. I am going to present through this slide. I have used primary data for the understanding the changes in the educational attainment in the scheduled caste from one generation to another generation. It is not possible to use secondary data because the required things is not available in the secondary data. That's why the researcher went through the primary data. Researcher has used schedule for the data collection. The sample size was 312. Data has collected from urban as well as rural area for the equal representation from both the areas. With this in-depth interview, focus group discussion also used for the data collection. Data has collected on individual level also and household level also. After collecting this data, data has analyzed by using statistical methods, statistical software, and the different formulas. I'm going to conclude that thing here. For the data analysis, data has converted into percentage of both the generations. Then it will be easy to compare both the generations educational attainment by using the percentage. Through percentage change, it has find out the educational changes from one generation to next generation. As well, chi-square test also used for the finding out the how generations are differ from each other in the educational field. And for the analysis of all these things, statistical analysis done in the Stata 14.0 software. For the understanding the educational changes, researchers had used school enrollment, highest level education, and English learning. While data collection, it was difficult task to collect the same data. For that, the head of the family is focused for the data collection, and when the researcher is not found the head of the family member, then the corresponding members has used for the data collection, and through that we have collected the all data. I would like to add one more thing while data collection. As we see, the Indian society is a male-dominated society. For that, firstly, we focus on the male head of the family. If we not found the male in that family as a head, then we switch to the female for the data collection. After the data collection, chi-square test is used for the finding out the difference between the two generations. As we know, what is actually chi-square test? In a brief, within 2 lines, I am going to explain the things. The chi-square test for independent compares 2 variables in a contingency table to see if they are related. In a more general sense, if we like to express the things, it tests to see whether the distributions of the categorical variables differ from each other. Here we can see the formula of chi-square test. It is here showing what actually these are. The x square, it is showing the chi-square value. After this analysis, we can get the chi-square value here. It is showing, sigma is showing the total of the all. Whatever value we will get, it is showing that total value. O is showing here the observed value. At the same time, E is showing the expected value. By using this formula, O minus E divided by E and bracket square and its summation, it is showing the chi-square test. After concluding all these things, we got some results. These results is in front of us. The first thing, that is the quality education is very important and essential for any society development. This is a very well-known statement. The second one, according to present work, the number of educated people is increasing in the scheduled caste from the last 2 generation in the Ahmednagar district. The next, from the first generation to second generation, education level is increasing. However, education improvement rate is very slow. Next, considering both the generations, 83.33% people reach up to the secondary education. Next, participation in higher education is very less. Next, only 0.48% scheduled caste students enroll in English medium school up to the secondary school. With considering both the generations, only 0.32% SC students enroll in English medium from primary education. And last one, that is the scheduled caste students are getting improvement in quantity education, but quality education in scheduled caste still have a big question mark. These are the results we find out from this study. By considering the time limitations, researcher has presented here the bullet points of the study only. In the research paper, it has explained in detail in a research paper. Thank you very much.
Chairman sir, Principal sir, Convener sir, and all the members of DPM Sri Mallikarjun and Sri Chetan Manju Desai College, Goa. Thank you all for giving me a chance to present my paper in front of you. The topic of my paper is application of ternary chalcopyrides in modern devices. My name is Ajay Kumar Sharma. Currently I am working as an assistant professor in Bidhan Chandra College, Asansol. Let's start with introduction. Ternary chalcopyrides are direct band semiconductors with tetragonal body center structure. Their crystalline structure is very much similar to the mineral chalcopyrite. They can be classified into two groups. First one is A1 B3 C26 and second one is A2 B4 C25. Their crystallic structure is very much similar to diamond, and in it every atom is bonded to the first four neighbors in a tetrahedral body structure. They are widely used in modern semiconducting based devices. Some common sectors where ternary chalcopyrides are applicable are lasers, photovoltaic, solar cells, light emitting diodes, non-linear frequency mixing devices, and electro-optical modulators. For lasers, the semiconductors should need two characters. First one is direct band gap and second one is relatively narrow luminescence band. These two characters are found in ternary chalcopyrides, so they are used as lasers. Following 7 sets of ternary chalcopyrides are mainly used in the production of lasers. Again, ternary chalcopyrite based photovoltaic solar cells are much effective and they are widely produced in commercial sectors, or they are widely applicable in the production of commercial solar cells. The solar cell based on these compounds have high efficiency, they are high flexible, and their efficiency potential is very high. The band gap for LEDs should be between 1.24 and 1.90. The following set of ternary chalcopyrides have band gap in this range, so they are used in the production of light emitting diodes. The light emitting diode based on ternary chalcopyrides are highly efficient and they produce every colored. Again, ternary chalcopyrides due to birefringence, they are used in production of non-linear frequency mixing devices. These devices are very effective and show wide range of refractive indexes. Again, ternary chalcopyrides are used in modulators. They can modulate any beam of signal to the output. Their stability is very high, they are very compact, and ternary chalcopyrides may be used in production of various other semiconducting based devices if their properties are studied in proper way. We have used the following references in our work. Thank you. You can send me your questions on my given email ID. Thank you very much.
Welcome Dignitaries, respected colleagues and my dear friends. I am Dr. Nisha Keval from Sri Mallikarjun College and Sri Chetan Manju Desai College. I will be presenting on the role of the bioinformatics in the vaccine development of the COVID-19. It's a very mini review and I have included only 2 brief points. Okay, coming to the introduction slide, as you can see, we have a coronavirus because of which the whole world is facing a pandemic situation. And in order to deal with that pandemic situation, the whole world has come under the collaborative discussion to find out the solution. One can understand the seriousness of the pandemic situation if you see this graph in which it shows that around 70 million people have been affected with the coronavirus already. As of the 12 December 2020 data, there has been a death rate, there has been a recovery rate also, and there are also active cases which are going on. So among the various approaches that have been employed in order to develop a vaccine against the COVID-19, bioinformatics is one of the approach by which the in silico analysis will help us to design or develop a vaccine. Coming to the first role of the bioinformatics in understanding the structure and the function of the target proteins and other biomolecules, the study has shown that the 3D structures of the SARS-CoV-2 protein which is available will be used for further bioinformatics approaches. Whereas the proteins like pattern-like proteases, PLPROs, phytoprotein, and 3C-like protease, that is 3CL4, are the most studied proteins which are being utilized for the bioinformatics analysis. And in order to carry out the screening experiments to detect the antiviral drugs, there is a web server which has been specifically designed, known as the D3 Targets 2019 and COV. So, in order to carry out this other experiment or analysis, various algorithms has been already used. Coming to the second point in understanding the role of bioinformatics in drug design, there is something called as the docking experiments which are carried out in which the COVID-19 proteases acts as a receptors, and the chemicals which are already present in the library, which comes under the category of antibiotic drugs, are used as the ligand to carry out this docking experiments. Now, from all over the world, various scientists, a group of scientists have utilized a different methodology in order to carry out the docking experiments, and some of these methods I have put up over here, such as MMPBSA, MMGBSA, all chemical thermodynamic integration, free energy perturbation. In addition to that, PI-MOL, Autodog, Glide, Fred, etc. also have been used. With this, I finish my slide. Stay home, stay alive, stop coronavirus, wash your hands till the vaccine has been completely functional. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, one and all. It's a great privilege to present our paper with title COVID-19 Lockdown in India, Impacts on the Economy and Key Sectors. Myself, Lavanya PB, Assistant Professor from Andhra Layala Institute of Engineering and Technology, along with Dr. Subbarayadu Tunga, Associate Professor and Head of the Department of MBA, Andhra Layala Institute of Engineering and Technology, have prepared this paper. Coming to the content, the main presentation is about how COVID-19 lockdown has impacted the Indian economy and its key sectors. And we have seen that the outbreak of the COVID-19 has greatly impacted the GDP, exports, and even performance of the key sectors. Now, the study period is mainly during pre and the post lockdown that we have considered, and we have observed how the impact is there on GDP, key sectors performance, and as well as the exports of the economy. The GDP has negatively impacted with minus 9.3% during the lockdown period, that is from April to June 2020, which has given a negative result of economy's performance. Coming to the economy, that we have divided the lockdown into three phases, that is the modest partial lockdown period, the strict lockdown partial period, and the strict lockdown period, where the cost of the economy is huge in US billion dollars, 12.5, 17.6 and 26 US billion dollars. During the full lockdown period, the economy has seen a very great loss of 26 US billion dollars. And even the key performances sectors have also been impacted very negatively. Coming with the financial resources, real estates and the professional services, where it has resulted in minus 17.3%, followed by mining, quarrying and the other services. And coming to the exports also, it is very greatly impacted. Gems and jewelers with 98.6%, where it shows the priority, where rice has come only with 7.4%. Now, let us see how it is going to impact the economy. It has impacted the economy in terms of the exports, in terms of the GDP, in terms of the lives of the common people. That is the people who are going to depend on the salary on a daily wage basis, migrant laborers, as well as on the people who are marginally and economically weaker sections. And the government has come out with various reforms, and those reforms have made the economy to get progress. But still it takes a long time for the economy to come out with the results. Now, Reserve Bank of India and Government of India have come out with some incentives and measures. Still, the economy takes some time to recover. Thank you.
Welcome to one-day multidisciplinary international e-conference. I am Shilpa Murkot from Karnataka University, Dharwad. My paper title is Assessment of Groundwater Quality for Drinking, a case study from Ilkarhalla Sub-Basin, Bagalkot and Koppal district, Karnataka. An introduction. Water is the most major overabundant compound of earth. Water is a life. No life can live without water. Groundwater is employed for drinking, domestic and irrigation purpose. The type of concentration of those elements is based upon the surface, subsurface, atmosphere, control of groundwater indication and supply of groundwater. Drinking water is a primary requirement in human lifestyle. Unsafe water used for drinking and cooking result in excessive health problems. Groundwater quality and its impact on human health in Ilkarhalla sub-basin were evaluated. This is the location of Ilkarhalla sub-basin. The Ilkarhalla sub-basin is located in northern part of Karnataka in eastern Dharwad Cretan. In methodology, 77 representative borewell samples were collected from Bagalkot and Koppal district. The study was carried out in two stages, that are physical parameters and chemical parameters. This diagram shows maximum, minimum and average value of the Ilkarhalla sub-basin including both pre and post monsoon. In conclusion, the analytical result of physical and chemical parameter of groundwater were computed with the standard guideline values recommended by World Health Organization for drinking purposes. Groundwater quality is dependent on type of pollutant and it is also dependent on nature of mineral found at specific space borewell in Ilkarhalla sub-basin. Hydrochemically, the groundwater contains higher concentration of electrical conductivity, magnesium, negative logarithm of hydrogen concentration and bicarbonate, moderate concentration of chloride, total dissolved solid, calcium, and low concentration of sodium, potassium and sulfate. Percentage of a sample exceed more permissible limit in post-monsoon compared to pre-monsoon. It may be due to rain and anthropogenic activity. Thank you.
A very pleasant day to the respected dignitaries and to all my dear research scholars. Myself, Shraddha Morozkar, along with my co-author, Ms. Siddhi Gaokar, under the guidance of Dr. Praveena Kelkar, welcome you all to a short video presentation on the topic Changing Coastline of North Goa from 1990 to 2019. To introduce the topic, coastal areas are the most densely populated areas of the world. The interference of the population has transformed the morphology of coastal areas drastically. In order to understand how human beings have interfered with this low-lying area and have altered, a case study of North Goa beaches was undertaken. This paper provides an overview of the percentage of erosional and depositional coast of the study area from 1990 to 2006 with the help of maps and the present features found along the coast during the survey. These are the objectives. This is the location map of the study area. My database and methodology include primary as well as secondary data sources, and this is the flowchart. Now I will discuss about the key findings. These are the details of coastal changes that are occurred along the coast of North Goa from 1990 to 2019. This data depicts the coastal changes along the coast of Keri to Morjim. In this, Terekol River has a great influence on the Keri beach, where the river transports sediments and deposits the same at the mouth of the estuary, where it gives rise to speed, coastal sandbars and channel bar. The Hermal shoreline has witnessed similar erosion changes in this coastal zone. To some extent, uniform condition has been noticed at Mandrem and Ashwem coast. These data represent the coastal changes occurred from Morjim to Anjuna. The upper and middle portion of the map shows the accreting coast during the study. The dominant role of river Shapura in carrying the sediment load towards the coast has resulted into the spit formation, tidal flats, sandbars, etc. along the both sides of the river, that is in the north and south, where Morjim and Shapura village situated respectively. This data depicts the coastal changes of Arpora, Kalangut and Nerul. According to my research, it is noted that the maximum erosion has occurred about 250 meters north of the Agwada Fort, where 25 meters of beach disappeared in 2 years between 2004 and 2000. This slide focuses on the coastal changes that has occurred at the beaches of Bardes and Tiswadi Taluka. The data shows the eroding as well as stable segment of Kampal, Miramar, Donapal and Shiridao beaches, whereas only little portion of Donapal and Miramar has been noticed deposition. The important features along the coast has investigated and photos of the feature has been captured using the GPS map camera. Also, the screenshot of satellite images of different years from 2006 to 2019 has been taken to verify the changes that has been occurred along the coast. This map illustrates the study area with GPS points are represented on the map with unique ID, and these are the features that have been captured accordingly. These images shows the features found along the coast of Pernem, Bardes and Tiswadi Taluka during the survey captured using GPS map camera. In this slide, the image portrays spit formation at the mouth of river Terekol at Keri village for the year 2005 to 2019, and these images are taken from Google Earth Pro. This slide renders the variation of sand deposition at tidal creek of the Baga beach in its various stages. I conclude by saying that the shoreline of North Goa is irregular and faces the active coastal erosion. It has been estimated that approximately 67.28% of the total area of North Goa coast has gone under severe erosion, whereas 32.07% coast accreted and 0.67% coast is stable. The various features, both erosional and depositional, such as wave-cut platform, cliffs, headlands, coastal caves, coastal arcs, sandy and rocky beach, spits, sand dunes, lagoons, channel bars and estuaries have found along the Pernem, Bardes and Tiswadi coast. These are some of the recommendations. These are the references. Thank you for patiently listening.
Good morning friends, myself Mahajan Deepak Hilal. The title of my paper is The Geographical Study of Air Pollution and Air Quality of Thane District. Abstract. The industrial city of Maharashtra, Thane, has been recognized as the most polluting industries in the state. Therefore, I have selected the topic Industrial Air Pollutants of Thane District. The percentage of population in urban centers itself having increased from 17.92% in 1960 to about 34.47% in 2019. Air pollution in Maharashtra has been aggravated over the years by development that typically occur as economies become industrialized. Objectives: to study about air pollution in Thane district, to study about role of industries in air pollution of Thane district, to know about various air pollutants emitted by industries in Thane district, and to take overview on industrial pollution in Thane district. Hypothesis: air pollution is harmful to environment and human being. Methodology: secondary data source is used to collect the data. Mainly, Maharashtra Pollution Control Board's website is used to collect latest data. Location of study region: Thane district, which is located in Maharashtra state of India. Air pollution by industries: there are two types of emissions: point source emission and non-point source emissions. Point source emissions are channeled through a pipe such as a chimney stack or vent. Non-point source emissions leaks from equipments like valves, taps and couplings. Industrial air pollutants: nitrogen oxides, sulfur dioxides, particulates, non-methane volatile organic compounds, carbon dioxide. These are the major air pollutants. In Thane district, industrial areas, the main pollutants emitted by industry are sulfur dioxide, particulates, nitrogen oxides. I discussed here the health impacts of that air pollutants. Sulfur dioxide: respiratory problems, visual impairments, heart and lung disorders, and death of plant tissues occur due to sulfur dioxide. Nitrogen dioxide: respiratory infections and pulmonary disorders, acid rain which reduces crop yields occur due to nitrogen dioxide. Nitrogen oxides. Particulates: respiratory problems, reduced lung functions, heart stroke, bone problems, cancer, heavy metal poisoning. Adverse effects on biodiversity occurs due to respiratory particulate matters. Ambient air quality monitoring stations in industrial area of Thane district. These are 7 ambient air monitoring stations located in industrial regions. According to that graph, the concentration of SPM higher than other air pollutants found in Dombivli CETP and Dombivli station. The Minister of Environment of Government of India has taken several measures to prevent and control air pollution in the country. I had recommend some suggestions. We should make the switch to clean energy sources. We should use technology to destroy pollutants at the source. If possible, we should choose non-toxic materials to manufacture goods. These are the references. Thank you.
नमस्कार मित्रांनो, मी नंदकुमार गोसावी. माझ्या शोधनिबंधाचे शीर्षक आहे ठाणे खाडीतील जलप्रदूषण आणि जलप्रदूषणाचे परिणाम. सारांश: ठाणे खाडी ही महाराष्ट्राच्या पश्चिम किनाऱ्यावर स्थित आहे. ही खाडी भारताच्या मुख्य भूमीपासून मुंबई शहराला वेगळी करते. ही खाडी आशिया खंडातील सर्वात मोठी खाडी असून तिची लांबी 26 किलोमीटर एवढी आहे. खाडी प्रदेशातील घरगुती आणि औद्योगिक सांडपाणी सोडले गेल्यामुळे तिथे प्रदूषण इकडून येत असते. प्रस्तावना: निःसंशयपणे आपल्या ग्रहावरील सर्वात मौल्यवान नैसर्गिक संसाधन हे पाणी आहे. दररोजच्या जीवनात आपल्या मूलभूत गरजा पूर्ण करण्यासाठी आपण पाणी वापरत असतो. तसेच दैनंदिन गरजा, जलसिंचन, वीज प्रकल्प, कारखाने यातील प्रक्रिया व स्वच्छतेसाठी पाण्याचा वापर करण्यात येत असतो. कल्पना: काही दशकांपूर्वी खाडी प्रदेशाच्या दोन्ही किनारपट्टीवर मोठ्या प्रमाणावर उद्योगधंद्यांची वाढ झाली व परिणामस्वरूपी मानवी वस्त्यांची वाढ झाली आणि खाडीच्या पूर्व किनाऱ्यावर आशिया खंडातील सर्वात मोठा औद्योगिक पट्टा निर्माण झाला आणि नवी मुंबई शहरी भाग वसला. या शहरी आणि औद्योगिक प्रदेशातून मोठ्या प्रमाणावर सांडपाणी सोडले जाते. तसेच खाडीत डम्पिंग ग्राउंड करून तिथे शहरी तसेच औद्योगिक कचरा टाकला जातो व यातून खाडीचे मोठ्या प्रमाणावर प्रदूषण घडून येत असते. जलप्रदूषणाचे स्रोत: याच्यामध्ये घरगुती कचरा आणि सांडपाणी, औद्योगिक कचरा आणि सांडपाणी, शेतातील जलप्रदूषके आणि औष्णिक प्रकल्पातील उष्ण पाणी यांचा समावेश होत असतो. पाण्यातील जलप्रदूषकांमध्ये कचरा, सांडपाणी, कीटकनाशके, तणनाशके, अन्न प्रक्रिया उद्योगातील कचरा किंवा टाकाऊ पदार्थ, पशुपालनातील टाकाऊ पदार्थ यांचा समावेश होतो. टीएमसीचे एका सर्वेक्षणात असे आढळून आले की तेथील खाडीच्या पाण्यामध्ये विविध क्षारांचे प्रमाण जास्त व ऑक्सिजनचे प्रमाण कमी असल्याचे दिसून आले. जलप्रदूषणाचे परिणाम: मानवावरील परिणाम: हेपेटायटिस, टायफॉइड, त्वचा रोग, अलिमेंटरी कॅनल यांसारखे विकार होऊ शकतात. नंतर यकृत, मूत्रपिंड, मेंदू, अस्थिव्यंग आणि उच्च रक्तदाब यासारखे आजार होऊ शकतात. पर्यावरणीय परिणाम: वनस्पती प्रजातींचे नुकसान, पाण्यातील क्षारता वाढणे, जलीय प्राण्यांचा मृत्यू, समुद्री पक्ष्यांवरील विपरीत परिणाम, इतर परिणाम. पाण्याचे भौतिक रासायनिक गुणधर्म बदलणे, पाण्याच्या रंगात चवीत बदल यासारखे परिणाम. निष्कर्ष या अभ्यासानुसार ठाणे खाडीची स्थिती गंभीर आहे. प्रदूषणामुळे परिसरातील अनिष्ट परिणाम होत आहेत. या परिस्थितीवर मात करण्यासाठी सरकारने काही उपाययोजना आखल्या पाहिजेत आणि उपायात्मक आणि प्रतिबंधात्मक उपाययोजना ह्या केल्या पाहिजेत.
Hello to everybody, Honorable Chief Guest, respected research guides, as well as my familiar friends, research students, myself Mr. Swami PM. Today we are going to read my research topic, efficiency and significance role of disaster management. This is a critical and crucial situation in this every worldwide, because this is coastal areas as well as different types of the volcanic tsunamis. This is every year the one nation with the faced to the this is a crucial condition. We have deliberately choose this topic, this my title. This research topic wrote my research guides Dr. PB Achule and me. My research main objectives, my research title is the main objective. This is the first to study efficiency and different types of role of disaster management, to identify government and private agencies to ensure coordinated action the all agencies of disaster management. The third objective is to inform the all plan about organized disaster management. The everyone is listen. What is the main meaning of the disaster management? Disaster is the two different branches. One is natural disaster, the second is the man-made disasters. This everyone has some methodology we have chosen totally. This is a research topic. My research paper is totally secondary data. One first disaster management institutes, the some in different states we have read. The first is a UN disaster management team, the Indian Armed Force, as well as Nehru Yuva Kendras, Home Guards, civil defenses, national service schemes, national credit crops, as well as management level, states and local level, the gravity of disaster, the scale of relief operations. The following decision making bodies are responsible for disaster management at the central levels. The groups of the secondary level to higher level and primary level to totally on the every state. It is run to the system, the state, districts, as well as block wise, as well as village wise. The disaster communication is the communication network of the government India, emergency communication, amateur, the ham radio, satellite based communication system, as well as this is the epidemic, the post disaster relief populations. The conclusion my disaster topics are the fishing industries are the fishermen funds and the provided for the boats, nets and other equipments, provision of the good food friends, other materials, construction, housing temporary and permanent. The repairing the fishing, the harbors and the increased taxes, as well as the post disaster relief rehabilitation is also
Good morning to one and all. I, Mrs. Reshma Prabhu Vellikar, Assistant Professor of Sridhara Kakalo College of Commerce and Management Studies, Kollim, Mapsa, Goa, and my research guide Dr. Manoj Kamath, Principal of Sri Mallikarjun and Sri Chetan Manju Desai College, Kankona, Goa, would like to present a paper on the topic Analysis of Relationship between Financial Variables of Indian Banking Sector. Let's come to the research problem of this particular paper. The growing NPAs of banks business due to dynamic environment gave a rise to credit risk. Credit risk refers to the probability of counterparty failing to repay the debt to an organization, and it arises due to an lending activities. The credit risk is a curse for banks for decades as it has a devastating impact in terms of financial loss to end banks. This demands the banks to analyze the financial position using a financial variables which aids in the measurement of credit risk. Thus, Measurement of credit risk is an essential mechanism for preventing a loss and maintaining the continuity of a banking business. It provides a mechanism for monitoring the credit risk and reliable reporting. Let's come to a rationale of this particular study. As per the RBI's report, the fact states that non-performing assets of public banks is something 13.2% as per September 2020 report, as against it is 2.99% of foreign banks. Now, for the last few years, NPA has emerged as an inevitable burden on the government and Reserve Bank of India. Several steps have been undertaken here by both in order to curb these increasing NPAs of Indian banks, but the efforts were not fruitful. So this situation drives the attention of the banker towards an assessment of financial position of the banks with the help of financial variables. Therefore, a present study has this particular objective, which tries to identify the relationship between the financial variables such as liquidity, profitability and leverage of public and private banks in India. An analysis of this particular variables will help to understand the financial position of the banks as it is positively or inversely affected by these three variables. These variables are the essential determinants for the success and survival of the bank, and hence there should be an optimum trade-off between these three variables. Considering this fact, the present paper aims at understanding the relationship between these three variables. Let's come to data and methods. This study has used financial ratios in order to measure the liquidity, profitability and leverage position of public and private banks in India. In this study, 9 financial ratios are being used to measure the above variables. So these 9 ratios consist of liquidity is measured through working capital to total assets and current ratio. Profitability is measured through EBIT divided by total asset. Similarly, return on asset, profit before interest and tax to current liability, total income to total asset. Leverage is measured here using 3 variables such as retained earnings to total assets, market value of equity to total liability and total deposit to total assets. At the same time, Pearson's correlation coefficient is used here to find the correlation between liquidity and profitability, profitability and leverage, and liquidity and leverage. So this will tell us about the existence, direction and the strength of an relationship. Let's come to the results and discussions after measuring this relationship using an correlation. So if we see here the relationship of, first we'll see the relationship between liquidity and the profitability. So in the present study, profitability is measured using P1, P2, P3 and P4, that is 4 ratios, and liquidity is measured using 2 ratios, that is L1 and L2. The relationship of these 8 ratios is being found out using coefficient correlations, and the coefficient table shows that there is significant weak relationship between 3 ratios such as L1 and P1, L2 and P2 and L1 and P4. However, there is no relationship between L1 and P3. Similarly, the second liquidity variable L2 shows a weak negative relationship with 2 variables, that is P1 and P2, but the same variable shows no relationship between P1 and P2. So the overall result shows that 5 variables out of 8 variables accounts for 63% of the observation shows an inverse relationship between liquidity and profitability. This may be the case of those banks which satisfies the depositors at the cost of profitability, as depositors ask for maximum liquidity as a guarantee for safety. Also, it may be the case of other banks that satisfies their shareholders at the cost of liquidity. So normally these findings are actually having an inverse relationships and are contradicting with certain studies which are conducted in the past. Let's come to the second part, that is a relationship between profitability and leverage. Now some of the studies found that some of the past studies found that there is a positive relationship between profitability and leverage variable. However, some other studies conclude the inverse relationship between profitability and leverage, whereas some other finance researchers claim that financial leverage does not have an impact on the profitability. Now, as per our matrix, it shows that there is a weak negative relationship between LV3 and P2. However, it shows a positive relationship with the two variables such as LV3 and P1 and also with P3. In total, the matrix shows a no relationship between 9 out of 12 ratios, which accounts for 75% of the observations do not show any relationship between leverage and profitability variable. Let's come to the third part, that is in relationship between liquidity and leverage. The leverage and liquidity variables are interlinked with variety of ways. Past studies reveals that positive as well as a negative relationship between leverage and liquidity. Thus, there is a controversial issues concerning leverage and leverage liquidity relationship. The relationship between these variables sometimes also depends upon the dividend policy. Higher the level of leverage will put the firm into a poor position. Now, if you see the results, 60% of the cases shows here no correlations between these two variables, whereas 40% of the cases shows a positive correlation between liquidity and leverage. So finally, in this paper, I would like to conclude that there is an inverse relationship between liquidity and profitability, and no relation is found here between profitability and leverage, and also between liquidity and leverage. Thank you.
Good morning to everyone. This is Parvati Kalamadi from Karnataka University, Dharwad. Now I am presenting on gender budgeting for gender equality, a study of trends and patterns in India. This is main contents, introduction, objectives and database, result and discussion, gender budgeting and gender equality, gender budgeting in India, suggestion and conclusion. This is introduction part. And main theme of my paper to estimating the fiscal support to gender equality through gender budgeting for the period of India. The study is based on secondary data derived from relevant reports of the government like the budget document, census report, union budget document, etc. This is result and discussion. The first one, gender budgeting and gender equality, and second one, gender budgeting in India. The gender budgeting allocation have a three-part. Women specific schemes where 100% of allocation, and pro-women schemes where at least 30% of allocation, and gender neutral scheme. And this figure shows that nature of gender budgeting in India. The gender budget as a percentage of the total budget increased from 4.79% of the total budgeted expenditure in 2005-06 to 5.9% in 2011 and 12, but later it declined and was only 4.72% in the 2020-21. And this figure shows share of the gender budget based on percentage. This is 34.1% in 2005 and 6, but it is declining tendency in the recent year. And this figure allocation pattern on 100% women specific schemes. The classification of schemes as 100% women specific is also not realistic because the expenditure on housing scheme Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana is included in it. In the last three budgets ending 2020-21 budgets, the PMAY said nearly 2/3 of the gender budget, which is totally misleading. And this figure shows allocation pattern on other schemes. 2018 and 22, 2020-21. Department of Higher Education, Ministry of Women and Child Development, School Education and Literacy, and Department of Rural Development and Health and Family Welfare. And impact of gender budgeting and women component plan on the socio-economic position of women. The improvement in female literacy rate in India is the recent times indicates the positive impact of expenditure under the gender budgeting statement in India. And conclusion part, the result indicate that gender budgeting efforts in Indian states have a positive effect on gender equality in primary education, and more relevating result was on infrastructure spending, and totally in the positive and significant effect of the gender budgeting on spending in including the total spending category as well as social service, education and infrastructure. Thank you.
Welcome to all presenters, participants, nears and dears. I am presenting an interesting and debated paper on environmental migrants and humanitarian crisis, a study of Afghan and Tibetan refugees in India for this multidisciplinary international conference. It is a comparative study of well-documented environmental refugees from extremely two diverse countries. First, the Afghanistan, as an Islamic dominant state, is being virtually controlled by three major forces: the Taliban, the present rule, and assumed terrorists. Due to prolonged ethnic, regional and political struggle for last 4 decades, Afghanistan has been virtually ruined and turned into the land of migrants due to fundamentalist policies of Taliban, ceaseless guerrilla wars and high level of insecurity. No option but to migrate for safer destination has been the only alternative for these refugees. Since 1979, after the USSR intervention in Afghanistan and thereafter the American intervention after a gap of 9 years, the exodus of Afghan refugees in various phases resulted in serious geostrategic environmental imbalance. India, being the major economic power, democratic laboratory and land of non-alignment, failed to stop the influx of refugees. On the other hand, Tibetans, virtually followers of Dalai Lama, are living in India for last 50 years as respected refugees with administrative, economic and social benefits. India, being a traditional land of Buddhism, have altogether different outlook about Tibetans, who are often treated as guest migrants and second-class citizens. Thus, the social environment about these refugees have different chemistry. In a comparative dimensions of Afghan and Tibetans, the political developments are directly associated with nationalism and religious fundamentalism. Oddly enough, it is characterized by cultural prejudice between the followers and non-followers of Islam, whereas the establishment of Tibetans in different ecological and geopolitical location hardly worries to India. Unfortunately, India is not the signatory of any international convention and hence cannot mandate to any refugee policy. Ironically, however, ruling BJP continues to pursue exclusive policies to deport Afghans for their suspected links with Islamic Jihad, unlike Tibetans. Humanitarian bodies and NGOs continue to pressurize and negotiate with ruling agencies of India to provide equitable justice for refugees. The question is why the religion, race and community are being shaped by the politically instigated rivalries and historically determined law rather than true environmental policies remains a subject of academic debate now and then. Thank you very much. The exodus of Afghan refugees in various phases resulted in serious geostrategic environmental imbalance. India, being the major economic power, democratic laboratory, and land of non-alignment, failed to stop the influx of refugees. On the other hand, Tibetans, virtually followers of Dalai Lama, are living in India for last 50 years as respected refugees with administrative, economic and social benefits. India being a traditional land of Buddhism have altogether different outlook about Tibetans who are often treated as guest migrants and second-class citizens. Thus, the social environment about these refugees have different chemistry. In a comparative dimensions of Afghan and Tibetans, the political developments are directly associated with nationalism and religious fundamentalism. Oddly enough, it is characterized by cultural prejudice between the followers and non-followers of Islam, whereas the establishment of Tibetans in different ecological and geopolitical location hardly worries to India. Unfortunately, India is not the signatory of any international convention and hence cannot mandate to any refugee policy. Ironically, however, ruling BJP continues to pursue exclusive policies to deport Afghans for their suspected links with Islamic Jihad, unlike Tibetans. Humanitarian bodies and NGOs continue to pressurize and negotiate with ruling agencies of India to provide equitable justice for refugees. The question is why the religion, race and community are being shaped by the politically instigated rivalries and historically determined law rather than true environmental policies remains a subject of academic debate now and then. Thank you very much.
Okay, namaskar to all, and myself Dr. Anil Kumar Tevatia. I am working as principal in one of the teacher training institute, namely DIET in Delhi, and today's my topic for presentation is social media as a tool of sustainability during COVID-19 pandemic. First, I would like to discuss about contribution of social media. There are many platforms in India, social platform. We have social media is nothing but a means of interaction among people. People use various social media as a tool for sharing all the relevant as well as irrelevant information that they like. Social media is a virtual communication network. The most popular platform of social media is YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and some other platform we can discuss face to face on virtual mode like Zoom, Cisco WebEx, etc. Today, when no source of media is unbiased, social media is the voice of people. It is the primary source of information for a majority of citizens of India is social media platform. They are used as vehicles for the transportation of the news, maybe fake news also, and other relevant information. Now, I would like to discuss about role of social media. There are various role of social media as we can see in this picture. First, take public opinion. We can generally use social media for this purpose. Highlight issues. There are many issues we have in our society, so we can discuss these issues on social media. Stay connected with the help of social media. We connected to each other, informing people about policies and actions, and make people more aware about all the practices going on in present time. Keeping close means what point to would like to in mind during pandemic. First one, virtual connection in place of real connection, make people knowledgeable, informing people about policies and actions, highlights important issues and direction, protects life of people and some psychological impact, and last one, public opinion. I would like to conclude my presentation. Every coin that has the right side has a dark side too. Here are some negative role played by social media. Fake news is the dark side of social media. Almost all the platforms have been in near to failed situation in acknowledging their responsibility in helping users to differentiate between fake news and facts. Sometimes we disseminate fake news without check whether it is right or wrong. The steps of various social media platforms on stopping misinformation are praiseworthy. Indian government should regularly post guidance and act as a watchdog on various sites. The other negative role of social media is that it has an increased level of anxiety, stress and worry among all the persons. It is advised that update on coronavirus should be checked only once or twice per day, not more than that. However, the use of social media has made a constant stream of reports and this can be dangerous. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I am Dr. Somnath Mukherjee, Assistant Professor of Geography, Bankura Christian College, now going to present my paper which is titled Anthropometric Status Indicator of Women's Health of a Newly Developed Ward of Bankura Municipality, Bankura, West Bengal, India. Now, the major objective of my research is to find out the health condition of Christian and non-Christian women on a comparative ground on the basis of body mass index. Now, as far as the methodology of this research is concerned, the nutritional condition of total 100 women of the age between 20 to 70 years have been investigated here by using the body mass index, and this is the general formula of the body mass index. And for the general perception and conception, I must include one thing, that the BMI result which is less than 18.5 means the chronic energy deficiency or CD, which is a very severe case of the health and nutritional condition of a particular human being. Now, as far as the result of this research is concerned, the result of the body mass index is recorded much more severe in case of the women of Christian community than their counterpart. 32 women out of the 50 from this community registered malnutrition, which is a very, very severe condition. BMI result of the rest of the non-Christian women is relatively better, though they have some other medical problems like obesity and its associated diseases like the heart diseases and the high blood pressure and high blood sugar, etc. Now, as far as the conclusion is concerned, this small but effective research suggests that there are significant amount of malnutrition among the women of the Christian community. This is mainly because of the economic condition and unawareness, and it requires immediate nutritional intervention plans and programs for these needy people of this newly developed ward of Bankura Municipality, West Bengal, India. Thank you very much for your kind hearing. Thank you all.
Hello everyone, myself Dr. Sujoy PV. I am the Assistant Professor with the Postgraduate Research Department of Commerce, Sacred Arts College, Tegra, Cochin. My topic today is Wellness Tourism and Introductory Analysis. As we have all heard about the term Wellness Tourism, it is getting very popular. So let me introduce that particular topic to you. it is very common that the human desire to travel to new places outside his or her usual environment for short periods of time for the purpose of business, leisure, etc. have been the principal reason for development of the tourism industry. Studies suggest that a combination of push and pull factors are responsible for people making travel-related decisions. The push factors are the internal intangible factors within an individual which motivate him or her to travel. These factors include escape from routine daily work, health, relaxation, adventure, social interaction, relationship, enhancement of prestige, etc. The pull factors are external, tangible factors which are connected with the features, attractions and attributes of specific tourist destinations. These factors include importance of the destination, price, quality of service in relation to accommodation, transportation and food, etc. The push and pull factors are not independent of each other but are interrelated. People travel because they are simultaneously pushed by the internal motivating factors and pulled by the external forces of the destination. Every individual desires to be healthy and disease-free. The ever-increasing economic affluence and changes in social values have resulted in people willing to spend more and more money to protect their health and improve their well-being. The push force within the affluent members of the society have been targeted by the tourism service providers by offering them attractive means to improve wellness. This has led to the development of a specialized form of tourism called wellness tourism. The article seeks to briefly define and analyze the scope of wellness tourism. Wellness, defining the term wellness. Wellness is a term which encompasses both happiness and health. It is a more psychological state rather than a physical state. Wellness is an integrated method of functioning which enables the individual to realize his full potential. From a tourism point of view, wellness can be defined as an active pursuit of activities, choices and lifestyles that lead to a state of holistic health. Wellness is an abstract concept and trying to achieve the same is a very complex process. The attributes that help achieve wellness are competence, resilience, social system modification, and empowerment. Studies have shown that it is a combination of these following attributes which make wellness tourism possible. Looking at the scope of wellness tourism, traditionally the tourism are of two types, business tourism and leisure tourism. However, the ever-increasing economic prosperity in society has led to people willing to spend more money on specific forms of tourism. The push factors in health tourism is a desire of the tourist to preserve his health, while the pull factors is the provision of good health care facilities and services along with the regular tourist amenities provided by the tourism service provider. Health tourism is one of the emergent aspects which has resulted out of wellness tourism. In that we have both illness treatment tourism as well as illness prevention tourism, and illness prevention tourism can be furtherly divided into wellness tourism and specific illness prevention part which is part of the wellness tourism. Thus, by going in a long way, wellness tourism can be defined as a sum of all the relationship and phenomena resulting from a journey and residence by individuals for the purpose of preserving and promoting their health and wellness. If you look at the dimensions of wellness tourism, it can be divided into 10. Some of them are wellness real estate, traditional or alternative medicines like Ayurveda, medical services providing including preventive and personalized medicines, spa economy, etc. Wellness tourism in India is getting very popular with various different states concentrating on this particular aspects, like Goa for concentrating on holistic living, Kerala on Ayurveda, Rajasthan for spas, heritage living, etc. So based on this, the government, the tourism department has promoted wellness tourism in India with specific guidelines being associated and various different seminars and events, etc. being hosted by the government. To conclude, the wellness tourism as an organized sector is still in the infancy stage, and it has tremendous potential for growth in India. However, due to the pandemic COVID-19, it has temporarily slowed down, but this has also been positive in the sense that people have become more aware with their health and well-being. Thus, this new push factor must be exploited by wellness tourism service providers in the coming decade to provide more tourists in the emerging tourism sector. Thank you so much for listening to me. I hope this would be very fruitful for you. Thank you.